About 10 months ago, we saw the release of the Flathub metadata guidelines, a set of guidelines with the goal of improving the application listings available on Flathub. Now, as a general concept, I think having guidelines is really, really good. Developers who don't know how to do an application listing should be given instructions on what to do, how to go and write a description, how to write a summary, things not to include, things to include, and as an idea, great idea. The issue is I was quite critical of some key parts regarding branding, icons, naming, other little things which are very important to the identity of an application. In my opinion, the guidelines frankly felt way too overbearing for what really is a tiny fish in the giant ocean of application distribution. And you know what? It's taken some time. Turns out, I was right. That happens quite often. It just takes a bit of time for people to realize it. Now that we've had the guidelines for quite a while, some people involved have started to notice a problem. 6 months later, it's actually longer than 6 months, it's 10 months, and with about 150 apps now meeting the Flathub metadata guidelines, I'm a bit confused that it's still overwhelmingly GTK apps, over 90%. Like, do people developing on other stacks not care about their app listing? Do they primarily use channels other than Flathub? Have they not made new releases in the past year? Have we just been particularly good at mobilizing people to care about this from the Gnome side? And users have started noticing as well. Why are KDE apps not promoted on Flathub? Whenever I visit Flathub, the app of the day and the list of apps directly above it are always Gnome apps which use the libadwaita toolkit. This is something I've been noticing for a while now. If we go to the site, this is a libadwaita app, 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 and now we're back to the start. And a lot of these apps here as well, these are also libadwaita apps. I don't even know what's here. Let's just randomly click them. How long do we get a miss? I don't know what this is actually. You know, that's the first miss. Oh, it says it right here. It's SDL2. Yeah, definitely not libadwaita. But like, you see the point here, right? Most of the apps that are listed here are libadwaita apps. Just randomly clicking things, you're going to mostly find libadwaita apps. Now, I want to be very clear. This is not because you have to be a libadwaita app to be promoted on Flathub. It's because of what we saw here. Most of the apps that meet the guidelines happen to be GTK apps, and most of those apps are libadwaita apps. This has given Flathub this sort of, I guess, aura, whatever term you want to use, of being Gnome first, of being the Gnome application distribution platform, and a big part of that is because of the way the guidelines are written. Now, it's no secret whatsoever, these guidelines are heavily inspired by the Gnome HIG, the Human Interface Guidelines, and this has had a bit of friction with developers outside the Gnome ecosystem. But rather than just sitting around and arguing why the users and developers are wrong and they should just adopt the metadata guidelines, someone did actually go out of their way to try and find out what's going on. Cassidy James made a post on the forum to ask developers, what is it that you don't like? What is wrong with the guidelines? Why don't you adopt them? And how can we improve them? Folks have pointed out that it seems like only ever Gnome apps that are featured. This is not an editorial decision of the Flathub team. This is simply a result of which apps are currently meeting the quality guidelines. Over 90% are using Gnome technologies and at least generally following the Gnome design guidelines. A lot of these apps are also in Gnome Circle, which is basically an ecosystem of Gnome applications. And if you're in Gnome Circle, you're following the Gnome HIG, so you're naturally going to be following the thing that is based on the Gnome HIG. While we're supported in part by the Gnome Foundation, we're a group of volunteers from the broader Linux ecosystem space, including both KDE and GNOME, plus other independent projects. We would really love to get more apps from other ecosystems featured on the homepage, so we'd love to better understand and hear your thoughts. Why are so few non-GNOME apps meeting the Flathub quality guidelines? Is it just that GNOME app developers are more likely to meet the guidelines because GNOME Circle requires Flathub for distribution of apps and has similar guidelines? 2. If you have an app on Flathub that doesn't meet the guidelines, why is that? Are they too difficult to meet? Do you disagree with part of them? We're going to see a bit of that. Do you not care about the benefits? Have you just not gotten around to it? 3. How can we improve the quality guidelines while still meeting the needs of Flathub? A level of consistency, the ability to craft beautiful, dynamic banners from metadata, and keeping Flathub looking and feeling modern to people coming from other platforms. We look forward to your feedback. Also, please share your app's name/link if you're willing, so we have more context. A lot of the developers, I don't think, read this part. To find their apps, I had to, dig around through their names to find out what they're actually connected to. It would have been nice if they had read the entire post. Now, I highly recommend you go and read the entire thread for yourself. I'm not going to read every single comment because, frankly, there is a lot of repeated issues. Here we have someone from the Ocular project. This is the listing over on Flathub. If you just look at it on the surface, it's a totally fine listing. Is it incredible? No, but it's just a Flathub listing. Now, besides just not knowing the guidelines existed, which I'm sure applies to other people as well, there are some actual complaints with the guidelines. The guidelines are too opinionated. So a lot of the issues are regarding the icon. 3 points of the guidelines. Not too much or too little detail, no baked-in shadows, and in line with contemporary styles. I don't know who Flathub thinks they are, but we're not going to change our perfectly valid icon that we have used for decades because of whoever looked at our icon in what is effectively a third-party site to Ocular decided they don't like it. And in case you didn't spot it before, this is the Ocular icon. And here is exactly what the guidelines actually say. Not too much or too little detail. The icon should be recognizable at small sizes, avoid too many tiny details, small text, and generally try and match other well-executed app icons in terms of complexity. Icons should also be complex enough to be recognizable, e.g. a flat single-colored symbol is too simple. I agree, this icon, not great. Text icons, very boring. This also not a great icon, it's basically just clip art. Same with this one. But this is a well-made, well-designed icon that an application has been using for a very long time. This is the application's identity, and it's exactly the same with Ocular as well. This is a totally fine icon. No baked-in shadows. The icon should not have any baked-in shadows or glows. Both the Flathub website and native stores apply a shadow to all icons, so baked-in shadows result in double shadows or other glitches. That is a problem for Flathub to deal with by themselves. It is a totally normal thing to have a shadow on an icon. Flathub and other native stores should not be modifying the icon of an application. And the worst of them all, in line with contemporary styles. The icon should be somewhat in line with the contemporary icon styles, i.e. not look like it has been updated in decades. The GNOME and KDE app icon guidelines are examples of the kind of style your icon should align with. So apparently, this one is bad, and these are good. Now, this looks like it's in line with contemporary styles. Like, if you put this one next to this folder icon, it wouldn't look out of place. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again, the contemporary icon design, frankly what it is, cult, is a scourge on icon design and has completely ruined creativity. This idea that you have to design your icon to be this minimal, simple icon, I hate it, and I cannot wait until the trends change again. And it's not just one developer that's issues with these guidelines. Being picky about the style, contrast, and shadows are nice aims from a design perspective, but means a lot of fairly good icons of well-known programs wouldn't qualify. A good example of this is for Filebot. This is a very simple icon. It's a totally fine icon. Yes, it hasn't been updated in 10, 15 years. But it doesn't matter. It's the identity of the application. Now, there is an explanation regarding the shadows. The shadow stuff is more of a technical reason, not really design. We can't add shadow that's consistent otherwise. Same goes for desktop app stores. We could just add our shadows on top, but that would still mean that some apps end up with stacked shadows, which would misrepresent those apps. But aren't you already misrepresenting those apps? So if you have double stack shadows, you're misrepresenting those apps. If they upload apps that don't have shadows and then you add shadows, you're still misrepresenting those apps. Like, nothing changes, it's just different misrepresentation. And other developers, like that of Community Remote, are just not designers. Created an app icon myself, not being a graphics artist, and it did not meet the contemporary requirement. Haven't tried to contact the suggested channels, as the app is neither a GNOME nor KDE native app, and was wondering why anyone should send up for this. This is the icon it has. Is it a great icon? No, but it's a totally fine icon. And there's another issue that listings like Firebot have. This is an unverified listing, so the Flathub listing is not made by the Firebot developer, it's made by a third party who just wanted to be available on Flathub. But this icon comes directly from upstream, so because this is a truthful listing, this can never meet the metadata guidelines. You would have to get upstream to make a new icon, or make a new icon yourself that is not the actual icon of the application. And people will do that for the Play Store, for the Apple App Store, but that's not what Flathub is. Another problem is no weird formatting or punctuation. Yeah, whatever. More arbitrary definition of what is considered weird. Specifically, app names should avoid non-standard formatting and punctuation. For example, avoid all lowercase, all uppercase, camel or Pascal case, and punctuation like dashes or periods. Cases where the formatting is part of an established brand may be exempt. And this is one of the biggest problems that people have. That is kind of just special treatment towards established projects, and essentially says new projects aren't allowed to do that, which doesn't feel very open to newcomers. As an example, this wouldn't ever be on Flathub, but it still works what I'm saying here. Systemd is breaking that guideline. But I guess because Systemd's been around for a long time, it's allowed to break the guideline. At what point are you allowed to break the guideline? Have you been around for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Are you allowed to break the guideline then? Is it based on the number of users you have? Is it based on the number of GitHub stars you have, the number of downloads you have on Flathub? Like, this rule doesn't make any sense and should be completely deleted. And this is a guideline pulled directly from the GNOME HIG. A good name should avoid non-standard punctuation or whitespace. For example, Superwriter. I don't see a problem with that name. As an example, IntelliJ. Idea. Also, IntelliJ-community. I can't think of an application off the top of my head that uses a dot in its name. That's certainly not as common, but they definitely do exist. You should not be policing how developers want to name their application. Now, if you want to say, we don't want applications with racial slurs, totally fine. But the punctuation? No. Stop it. Now, moving to an issue I didn't initially consider, the only guideline my app fails to pass is the non-technical summary, but I don't really know how to solve that, given that my app is pretty niche. For some more examples, let's say you're trying to package Wireshark, or a crypto wallet, or a 3D slicer, or some very niche data analysis tool. Naturally, these are tools that are going to have relatively technical summaries. But more generally, the length restriction is kind of arbitrary and ridiculously short. The summary is basically the equivalent of the GitHub about box, and looking at the repos I have starred, I don't think a single one comes in under 25 characters. The summary should ideally be between 10 and 25 characters and no longer than 35. This is fine for a lot of applications, like it's a calculator. You can do calculations, right? Like, I don't know. Calculator. Like, what do you need for a calculator? But for a lot of other things, it's just not really workable. But also, it doesn't really matter because it's not enforced for translations anyway. It only matters in the English text because There are some languages which are considerably shorter to write a lot more text, like Japanese, and other languages where you just run on sentences like French. Now, another common recurring problem is with screenshots. Not a single problem, there's a couple of them. One is screenshots don't use default settings. What does that even mean? Yes, I have looked at the linked documentation and it is useless. No such thing as default settings exist since every distribution on the planet has a different default style. Well, again, these are guidelines made from the Gnome HIG, so Gnome definitely has a default style. However, KDE, KDE doesn't, or Cosmic doesn't, or Sway doesn't, or Hyperland doesn't, or XFCE doesn't, or every other desktop doesn't because they allow you to go and theme the desktop. One is screenshots are not up to date. What? Has the person even run the app? Because they look up to date to me. As an example, here we have Calligra, and here we have Ocular. This meets the metadata guidelines, this doesn't. There is more than one problem here, and they're kinda interlinked. The reason why he is getting pinged is the decorations are not the current default KDE decorations. Here we have a red circle on the X, and here we don't. That is the reason why this screenshot is not considered up to date. So with the decorations that I use on my system, any screenshot I take would never be considered an up-to-date screenshot because I don't like the default KDE decorations. But I have a very simple question here. Why does it matter? You're not packaging the KDE decorations to go onto Flathub. In that case, yes, they should be what you're actually distributing, but you're distributing an application that if you run it on a different desktop, it's going to have different decorations because this application doesn't use client-side decorations. The part that's worse, though, is it's not even clear what they wanted you to screenshot. Someone said, I made a GNOME Classic guest account on Ubuntu 24.04, made 0 changes, and took the screenshots. How can I get more default than this? The issue is the same reason why screenshots on my system wouldn't be allowed as well. It's because Ubuntu installs some extensions by default and makes modifications to GNOME. It is the default environment on Ubuntu, but it's not the default environment of GNOME. What it says is screenshots should reflect the current state of the app's interface, not some previous version. If an app update makes visible changes to the interface, screenshots should be updated at the same time. This also applies to changes in the environment's default window decoration layout. Now, environment could either mean the desktop environment or the operating system environment. That is a screenshot in the default operating system environment, but not the default desktop environment. But again, why does it matter? You're not packaging GNOME. Now, along with the icons needing shadows, the windows need shadows as well, along with rounded corners. But this is a problem, because what if you're on a desktop like the Cosmic Alpha, which doesn't currently have window shadows, or you're on Sway, which doesn't have rounded corners? That is the default of that environment, but it's breaking the rules on Flathub. I don't think you realize just how bad of a guideline this actually is, and how much extra work this puts onto Flathub for literally 0 reason. So what they need to do is either say screenshots have to be taken on KDE or GNOME, or what they need to do is maintain a database for the decorations of every desktop on the planet, alongside keeping track of any changes they make to make sure that, okay, if a developer took a screenshot on Sway, well, the Sway default changed. Okay, they need to retake a screenshot. Oh, wait, they're on Hyperland. Wait, what does the Hyperland decorations look like? Wait, what if they're on X11? Oh, they're on a desktop that doesn't have decorations by default? Okay, so they don't need to have decorations. Wait, which one has shadows? Which one has rounded corners? Oh, they round it by this much. They round it by that much. Oh, this desktop, they just make everything have square corner. What? Wait, okay, but now they're on this. Oh, KDE changed some stuff. Okay, KDE has new decorations now. Oh, Breeze is no longer the default. They reworked Breeze. Like, why do this to yourself? Why add so much extra work and care about the decorations? And requiring developers to spin up a virtual machine to take screenshots for something that frankly doesn't matter shouldn't be the solution either. If I had an application on Flathub, I would never, ever follow this guideline. Up-to-date screenshots that are up-to-date for the application, understandable. But up-to-date decorations for the desktop I'm taking it on, no, that's stupid. In my opinion, decorations shouldn't even be shown unless you're using client-side decorations where the decorations are actually part of the functionality of the application. And others took issue with the screenshot sizing requirements. In order to ensure the text interface elements are visible, scaled down in the App Store UI, the window size should be 1000 by 700 pixels or smaller, 2000 by 1400 for high DPI. I tried and I literally cannot get our program small enough to fit within the tiny 1000 by 700 requirement without hiding UI elements. Some apps work well in such small window sizes. Obviously, we don't want 1080p full screen screenshots of file managers, but some are used maximized. How should Photoshop or something like that meet this criterion? Surely a better size requirement would be realistic for the practical use of the program while maximizing visibility of UI elements. There is a reason why on the Play Store and the App Store, they get you to take a screenshot of the full application window running, not in an emulator running at a smaller size that might be scaled down, the full application window so you know what it actually looks like. Now, before anyone actuallys me, they do allow marketing screenshots, so not every screenshot is going to be like that, but you know, it's very important for a user to know what the application actually looks like when they're running it, not like zoomed in and scaled weirdly to make it fit this random arbitrary requirement. But all of these issues we've seen lead into the biggest problem so far. Not the fact that these issues are here, that is a problem as well, but the fact that developers who don't meet the guidelines, who try to meet them, don't know why they didn't meet them, are not given any feedback on what they've done wrong and what they need to improve. Honest question. If you tried to legitimately meet the guidelines and for whatever reason, something didn't work, whether it's a screenshot or anything else like that, it just said, nope, you didn't meet this guideline, and you read the guideline, you've done exactly what it says, are you even going to continue trying to meet the guideline? These guidelines are not requirements to be on Flathub. It's just requirements to be promoted on Flathub. So, at least for me, that would be the point I give up and just never look at them again. Now, because he started the thread, Cassidy James also put together a list of the common complaints, pretty much everything we've talked about in this video, laying them out. Totally fine, not judging the complaints, not complaining that the developers have these issues, actually just laying out the problems for everybody to see. I think the biggest problem that Flathub has is the way it's trying to position itself, because with the guidelines it currently has, it's trying to be a Linux application ecosystem like a more generic GNOME circle, although heavily inspired by those GNOME guidelines, as opposed to the way that developers outside GNOME are actually using it, which is as a Linux application store, where they use this as a distribution channel. They're not trying to be a Flathub application. Because let's be honest, Flathub is a very, very tiny fish in the giant ocean of application distribution. A lot of developers aren't even Linux-first developers. They have a Linux version, but Windows or macOS is their focus. Flathub is not Steam, it's not the App Store, it's not the Play Store, and developers of established applications will not and should not redesign their identity for the heavy-handed guidelines of one application store that isn't even the main way that people distribute applications on Linux. Hopefully these criteria can be adjusted to make them more applicable to applications outside the GNOME ecosystem, because I do think guidelines are good. I just don't think that the guidelines they currently have are ever going to be expanded outside of Gnome. Maybe a couple of developers here and there are going to do so, like the current state they have. But you're going to have Flathub be primarily the Gnome application distribution platform, and when people point that out, they are going to be right. But what do you think? Do you think Flathub is going to change? Do you think Flathub is going to improve? Better yet, do you think Flathub should improve, or do you think developers should embrace the guidelines as they currently are? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video. And if you really liked the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe, Arbitrary, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and be gone, minimal icons.